do the lights. Is that better? No sleeping, okay. I know it's tempting when the lights go down. Morning, everybody. Aww. Nobody ever replies. You're such a good group. Thank you. It's makes my day, really. I hope you're all well. Slightly fewer of you today. I don't know why. Maybe there'll be some late arrivals, but we'll carry on. So, just before I start today, have you all completed the survey about your broad topic area that you're interested in for your dissertation? We just had a few students who hadn't done it. The allocation process is done, and actually by, what day is it, Tuesday, hopefully tomorrow or Thursday, you will find out who your supervisor is, and you'll find out who your personal tutor is. They may be one and the same, they may be the same person, they may not be, okay, but you'll be told about that this week. So that means in the next week or so, next week, you'll be able to meet your supervisor, you'll be able to meet your personal tutor, okay? And it's really, really important. I know I'm not talking to the whole cohort here, but it's really important that you go and you meet your supervisor and you maintain that regular contact with them, okay? That would be my big piece of advice. So you have to choose a broad area of interest, or more than one, and I think my advice also to you is trying to kind of read and think a bit more broadly around those topic areas and just start to engage with that area. I am trying in these lectures to give you some areas that you might be interested in, and after week 6 as well, when Jack and I will start to talk to you more about planning and the strategic ideas. Hopefully as well you'll get some broader kind of topic areas that you might be interested in. I know I've probably talked, not to a great extent, but about sustainability. There's a lovely article here. I have listed it on here. We're talking about what's going on in the external environment as part of the session today. And actually identifying those big areas and those big changes in consumption and the nature of contemporary consumption and how we are today as consumers is something that might inspire you and fire the inspiration for that topic area. So this is called Fast Fashion Sustainability and the Ethical Appeal of Luxury Brands. That covers a lot of areas which, you know, interesting, very interesting paper. But I think it's about not being afraid to go onto Google Scholar, to go onto Emerald, and start to look for some journal papers in the subject that you're interested in. I am sure that some of you have already done that. I'm sure some of you are very keen on and understand completely what your topic will be. But if you haven't, start to engage, start to think, what would I be interested in doing? Because the dissertation is a big piece of work, and actually the more interested you are, the more you, same for the lectures, same for your coursework, the more you engage, the more you take part and understand kind of the topic area that you're looking at, the more interesting it will be. And when something's interesting, it's more sustainable, and you don't give up, and it doesn't become the world's biggest burden. Okay? So I'm just trying to see where we can go in terms of passion for the subject area. Okay? But I would encourage you to start now. Okay, so today I've got a few questions and answers that were raised in the seminars. I'm quite happy to do this like this. I have this morning, I'm sorry I was in London last week, but this morning I have set up the submission portal for your essay. Okay, it's on Turnitin, it says Assessment 1, Essay. So you'll be able to find that when you're ready to submit. Okay. You have to submit by next Friday at 1 p.m. Okay, so that's lunchtime. It's not 1 p.m. That doesn't mean in the morning. It's 1 p.m. 1,300 hours. What? What's the problem? What's the problem? Okay. Do not submit it at 1 minute past because it will be classified as late. Not my rules, university rules. Okay. Do not wait until 2 minutes to 1 to try and submit your work. Okay. Use common sense. Technology is the interface, isn't it, between you and us and me marking this, but getting it submitted in time. That we cannot make any exceptions if students, unless there's been a technical hitch. But for that reason, please make sure you don't think it's okay. 5 to 1 will be fine, I'll try then. Yeah? Doesn't matter if you submit it tomorrow if it's done, or next Thursday. The portal is now open. Okay. I can't stress enough in terms of penalties for late submission. What else have I done? I have set up a discussion board. Okay. Now then, you know what I said last week. My rules, same as Selena's. You okay, you two? Yeah. Okay. Discussion board. You have to check the questions that have already been answered, both in the lectures and on the discussion board, okay? And the discussion board won't be the place to say, I don't know what I'm doing, please can you help, okay? Because it's just, that's not the forum, is it, okay? I hope that none of you feel like that. You may feel like that, but that's quite natural and normal, isn't it? When you're asked to do any piece of work, some of us will go, oh, I don't know what to do. But actually, some of it is just in the doing and the planning and the going to the seminars, which I know you've been doing, which is great, and following some of that guidance. Okay. But at the end of the day, it's your work. It's your piece of work. And you have to own that work, okay? And you will enjoy it. And it's actually a small piece of work. It's just 1,000 words, okay? So, but I will quickly. The first question, is there an acceptable plagiarism percentage? Okay. Sometimes, if students are writing in a way that is not synthesising the work of others and translating the work of others, they will use big direct quotes, okay? Big chunks of text that are directly taken from the original source and they are referenced or there's a citation with them, okay? If you do that, that's not malpractice, that is not plagiarism, it's what we call poor practice, okay? If you do that, so if you take a series of large direct quotes from the literature, your Turnitin percentage in terms of plagiarism could look high, okay? It could look high. Ideally, you need to avoid it. You need to put that work into your words, unless it's the most amazing thing that's ever been written, and then you can use a direct quote, okay? But if it's something quite broad that you can translate into your words and still cite that original author, that's the way to do it, okay? Obvious plagiarism is when there are direct pieces of material in the work with no support, okay? And we do, we occasionally do get that. So I'm not going to say that is there an, so we'll have some students who have 1%, okay? It stays green until about the 20% mark, okay? Once we get past 20, it starts to go yellow. But we look at everything anyway, okay? So just try and avoid it, but most of it is about your skill as a writer and avoiding this too many direct quotes, hopefully. I have done the portal, all done, all there, okay. Introduction and conclusion, it might be useful to say, this covers, this covered, okay? Just very brief, okay? You've only got 1,000 words, okay? But your introduction will generally just lead into your debate and your discussion about the strategic planning process. Okay? And your conclusion will summarise the key points from your essay. Okay? Yeah? Okay, are citations within... They are included. So citations within the work are included in your word count, but the reference list is not. Okay? There is a tolerance. If you look at the instructions, there's a tolerance of plus or minus 10%. That means you could be at 900 words, you could be at 1100 words. Okay? Don't sit there. Obviously, you don't need to sit there. That's why we wouldn't do that. Don't try and extract all your citations, etc. Just stick around the 1,000 words. Okay? Do examples. If you want to use examples, there is no request in that piece of work at the moment to use examples, but they may help you, obviously. So if you want to use examples, of course, you can talk about fast fashion, you can talk about specific brands, you can talk about the industry as a whole. But we know that the industry is segmented into different areas, okay? So you might work on one specific, you might talk about one specific area, like fast fashion. And you know what? Maybe some of these models in that fast fashion business scenario, maybe they just are not too good. Maybe they don't work so well. Where you've got very short time frames, where you've got technology leading, maybe some of these models are a bit too slow, a bit too functional, a bit too heavy. Yeah? Okay? That's something I want to see what your brains are thinking, not mine. Okay? So, yeah, so you can use them as and when you need to. And of course, it all depends on if they're relevant, how you're talking about this particular model, and where the fit is. So use your common sense and, you know, use your reading ability and your investigation, but you should be doing that. You should be thinking about what you need to do with this piece of work. And generally more help on the literature review. Well, in the seminars you've got lots of slides. You're just going to have a go at doing, including literature. This is all this is about, to support your answer and your argument, okay? And I was talking to a student yesterday, actually a final year student, and she was saying, oh, I read papers and I just can't see the point of each bit, and I don't know how to distill the paper down. And you know what? I just found a really lovely, easy to read paper. Let me show you what it is, because it's just a really useful way of seeing how academics build arguments. Okay, I'm just going to see if this should hopefully work now. Oh no, I didn't put this one in. I don't know, put this one in. Let's have a look. Christopher Moore Retail. Fashion clothing. It's this one. I can put this link up on Blackboard, and the reason I gave this paper to her was that she's an international student, and I think she was saying I can't get the point from each bit of the papers and the books that I'm reading. So really, this is all about fashion consumption. They talk to some groups of consumers, so it's a really straightforward in terms of its principle. But the nice thing and the useful thing about it is the way that Chris Moore opens this with his introduction and then looks at some areas that wants to talk about, wants to put his point across, and the way in which he uses the literature, for example, here, yeah, just to support the flow of his argument and his writing. So reading a couple of papers from Christopher Moore, he writes qualitatively, he writes really clearly. Just reading a couple of these kind of papers might help you to see the way in which academic language and academic writing and that approach to formal writing helps you to put your argument across. Okay? Yeah? It's what we're all here for. Well, partly what we're all here for. Because understanding this approach also obviously helps you when you come to write this big beast of a dissertation. Because you've got to be in that frame of mind where you are writing academically, with support, formally, and not anecdotally based on what your things you have in your head. Okay? So it's a skill in itself, but it's something you've got to train yourself to do. So you may as well start now. Is that fair? So these papers, Christopher Moore, if you Google, go into Google Scholar, look for Christopher Moore, put retailing, then you'll find him. I'll put this link up on Blackboard anyway, but you know, have a look at some of these papers. I find these, they are informative, they are easy to read, they are what I would call gentle papers, and they will, I think they'll help you formulate your approach. Okay, but refer back to the notes from the seminars, refer back to that kind of skill and practice, go to the seminar on Thursday, and just, yeah, don't be afraid, try not to worry, do rather than worry, okay? Easy to say, isn't it? Easy to say. But, you know, oh, my news from last week was I got my letter because I passed my PhD. Hooray! Oh, thank you. Oh, so I completely, as I said in week 1, I understand what you will go through, okay? I understand the dissertation process. I understand the pain of having to start and choose and read, okay? So I do understand that. But what I found the best thing to do is do. Think and do, and think and do, and process your thoughts and do some more, and write it on a piece of paper. And I had note after note after note that I'd handwritten, and that helped me get my thoughts down. Okay, it's all over now, so I'll be a lot happier from now on. Whew, okay. So I hope I've answered those questions. Your cover page, you just write your own cover page, it's fine. The submission link is on Blackboard. I'm not really expecting huge appendices for this. It's an essay at the end of the day. You save your appendices more for your report, which is the second assessment, okay? Yeah, it's 1,000 words, okay? That's all. Yeah? Okay. So, we're kind of, where are we? So we're week 4. Next week, we're going to stop all the analysis. We're going to stop this. We're going to stop it. We're going to talk about the why we do it. You ready? We're going to talk about the why, the understanding of the organisation in order to facilitate company growth, brand growth. We're going to talk about brands next week. We're going to talk about brands, brand equity, the relationship with consumers, and it's something I'm quite fascinated in. So hopefully that will be enjoyable, and it's kind of it's not the complete end of analysis, but it's the end of this kind of analysis journey that we're on at the moment. So today we are going to. We've done that bit, haven't we, from current slide? We're just going to work out where we are and look at this external environment and how influential it may be, and how consumers, how companies need to be aware of what's going on in the environment in order to affect change. So we'll look at the macro and the micro, and then we'll finish off by pulling the information together and thinking about the SWOT tool, okay? And how, now some of you will know about SWOT, Pastel, I know that some of you don't, but you know, the SWOT and Pastel, which we'll look at Pastel in the macro environment. SWOT and Pastel are probably the easiest to kind of comprehend tools, but actually sometimes the most poorly used, because it's really easy to turn them into just a big list of huge things that an organisation can't really do anything with or about. Okay, sorry, I'm away from my microphone. Is this on? Okay, and then we're going to wrap the whole thing up with a little bit of Ansoff and just thinking about that tool. And then really, you've then got all of the kind of tools and frameworks that we've looked at, pick one. Be focused. It doesn't matter which one you pick. Just pick one and analyse it and critique it and try and find some literature that supports your arguments for and against, and talk about its applicability in the fashion industry. So we'll try and have a think as we go through. Does this work for fashion? Does this work for fashion? Does that work? Okay? Because fashion is a slightly different industry, but it's a huge industry and it's important. So, you know, we have to work some ways out of understanding. So we've done this one. So we are here in the macro environment and the micro, which is the competitive environment. And next week when we look at brands, we'll look more at competitor sets and we'll look at positioning. So we're not going to talk about that too much today, but obviously it's about the understanding of what your competitors are doing, who they are, and how they talk to the same group of consumers that you do. Okay? So it's fairly fundamental, isn't it? But I think it's something that businesses often overlook, because they quite often are so internally focused on what they're doing. They don't imagine that either a competitor will come into their space or that competitors are in their space. And we are very good as consumers at substituting. I won't buy that. I'll go there. I'll swap. I won't buy a coat. I'll buy a jacket. I'll buy something from somewhere else, from another supplier, from another retailer, from another brand. Okay, and competitors underestimate consumer power a lot of the time. I think they do. So this just kind of shows how, at the end, we will talk about the SWOT and how that might work in terms of after week 6, when we start to look at not the implementation, but looking at developing strategies and formulating strategic approaches. Okay. So, very thirsty today. So, we focused here for a while on the firm, the business, the organisation, and we've looked at some ways that we can analyse and understand the firm. And so we're going to move outwards towards the microenvironment, which that arrow needs to be a little bit further in. I had to move the model over and it's clearly not moved the arrow. But that's all about firms, suppliers, customers and competitors. And the macro environment, which is the big platform that can impact all businesses, any business, okay? Things we all need to contend with. Universities need to contend with. You know, everybody needs to contend with both of these elements of the external environment. Doesn't matter whether you are profit making, whether you're a retailer, or whether you're a higher education institution. In fact, I would say that higher education has got some of the most turbulent things going on in their external environment, and trying to manage that is really, you know, it's a really big challenge for organisations that are educational institutions rather than marketing-led, say, retailers or brands. It's interesting, but it cuts across every sector. So yeah, the macro environmental forces set the scene for everyone. They're things that are happening around us globally, locally, everywhere, okay? And the microenvironment is all about the specific industry. So this is fashion industry we're talking about. Okay. But if it's not the fashion industry, it is the industry in which your company sits. Okay. So it doesn't have to just be fashion. So we're going to talk about really how the PESTEL or the PEST model, you can call it PEST. PESTEL, spent, step, PESTEL. It doesn't matter. Okay? If you see one of those, what's the word? Anyway, those letters, I can't remember the word today. If you see one of those, they all mean the same thing, okay? It's a tool for analysing the external environment, the macro environment. And it looks at political, environmental, social, technological, legal and economic. And actually some of these sit quite closely together. So political, legal, political, economic, they're very, you know, some of the factors you could place into either section. Okay. I don't want to labour this too much. Pestle model. As everyone, you know, I'm hoping you've all heard of it because it's just a very, very common framework, even outside the marketing industry. It's, you know, it's commonly used. So, yeah, if you narrow it down to pest, it's absolutely fine. As long as you include things in the right place and as long as you capture them, it's just a tool for capturing what's going on. Okay, so political is around government, okay, clearly just thinking about, certainly about the UK, but also about Europe. Obviously we have the Brexit is a political issue that's going on and on and on and on and on. And, you know, if you're not from the UK, you probably are not really bothered by it. But if you are, it is taking over our lives and it's not been resolved. And, you know, it's got issues and implications for business, really big issues and implications for business. And there's a lot of kind of fear and, you know, consumer fear as well. So all of these factors can influence and kind of resonate with the consumer as well. Because what's going on politically, it might affect your business. What's going on legally, it might affect your business. It might be business rates, it might be something else. But you also have to think, blimey, you know, if there are big political issues and change happening, then it affects everybody, doesn't it? It affects consumers. So economic factors are really important, aren't they? We know this for brands, for retailers, for shopping. Economic factors and kind of the general trends, what people earn, their spending power, levels of unemployment, etc., etc. Okay? Again, it's about using that to see how your consumer group might be affected by that. If you're a luxury brand, you might be looking at slightly different things than, you know, someone who's a fast fashion brand trying to target young consumers, really young consumers. Okay, but there are factors here that the model can consider that may influence business operations. Okay. From my perspective, and I'm sure most people agree, the two biggest influencers in the social arena, okay, because who we are as consumers, the changes in contemporary consumption, the way we behave, and this link actually, not just, so technology doesn't just affect the business in terms of, is it about manufacturing process, but obviously technological development in the whole marketplace and how consumers are acquiring technological skills that actually go far beyond what some retailers can manage and meet in terms of expectations. So just kind of, I am not going to go through each one of these individually, do not worry, but it's just to illustrate the kind of depth of each one. So political and legal, as I say, they can link together, you know. I think the thing to do when you come to using the tool or you come to critiquing the tool is thinking about what it's good at. And so it's good at capturing what things are going on in the environment that affect the organisation. So political and legal, this list could go on forever. Okay, but it covers legislation, environment. Now, big one, again, kind of goes with sustainability. It links back to what I was talking about last week about supply chain, the damage to countries who are kind of at the end of that supply chain or the start of the supply chain. And I can see something, like everyone probably else can, certainly in this country, in the UK, I think there will be tighter legislation. And that will probably ripple out round the globe eventually, but it will have a serious impact on fashion companies. Do we agree? Yeah. It's got to happen, hasn't it? It's got to happen. This is my opinion. But you can see that coming because there just does not seem... If you remember last week, I mentioned that not one retailer that this journalist tried to speak to would talk about their sustainability, about their operations, about their supply chain. And that says to me, very soon there will be legal implications here. Okay, so that it's further down the line, but you know, it's a good way if a company's kind of sitting there thinking, well, we're in fast fashion, we've got factories all over the world, we don't really have a great deal of control, etc., etc. When they're looking out kind of longer term, this is something that they're going to have to address and deal with. So it's useful in that sense if it starts to highlight and flag an issue that's coming. Okay. And to me, it's a bit like when you look out like this, what is coming over the hill towards you? Okay. Things like taxation, foreign trade, employment law, they are all things that affect organisations in the broadest sense, or may do. But you know, employment law, simple things such as increase in minimum wage. Fashion companies tend to employ young people on low salaries. A hike in minimum wage has implications for profit and bottom line, okay? So it's useful. It's a useful tool. Those are the kind of things. Again, economics, the size of the labour market, who wants to work, who can you, if you're not a fashion company, if you're a different kind of company, if you're the NHS in Britain and you're looking for workers, and actually lots of people have gone back to the rest of Europe because of Brexit, and we're not recruiting nurses from Europe, that's a huge issue, okay? Luckily in fashion, we haven't got that issue. But yeah, growth rate, how people feel, because economic factors affect money in our pockets, okay? Exchange rates obviously have a huge impact on exports, but they're good for, no, imports, but they're good for exports, okay? We have suffered here, you know, think about where you are from, where you're from your own country, but in the UK, the pound has gone like this, okay? So the value of the pound, it's shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, okay? So that has an impact. As I say, people's disposable income, what they can afford to spend, and how good they feel as consumers about the state of their economic situation and their finances, has a big impact on their kind of mental attitude, I suppose, their attitude towards shopping and what they buy and what they consume, okay? So, lots of things to consider there. So, you know, you can already see, actually, that the PEST model, or the PESTEL model, covers so many different things. This could be one of its downsides, I suppose. But it is, you know, it can capture so much information. It's about making that useful for the organisation. I suppose one of the big things that, as marketers, we're probably going to be interested in is socio-cultural factors, because these are kind of changes, but you know, lifestyle changes, things like sustainability, cultural attitudes tend to drive our behaviour in terms of how we shop, where we shop, why we shop. Okay. And you know, we have in the UK, we have an ageing society. We also have lots of women, like myself, who are over the age of 40, can't find anywhere to shop, don't know what to do. The retailers are not capitalising on these. I think a lot of the time when retailers or brands look at the kind of socio-cultural nature, they can't sometimes grasp exactly what to do with that and where they can fit into those people's kind of change. So, you know, it's really difficult to go and find a great retailer that there are very few that cater for, let's say, more mature women, but women who've got money to spend and just don't know where to spend it. Big opportunities, you see. The social, all these factors can offer opportunities, obviously. They can also be threats. That's the whole point, isn't it? We'll talk about pulling that together later on, but lots of opportunity here to tap into lifestyle, etc. Technology just feels like a huge influencing factor, but again, it's about how companies identify the pertinent technological developments for them and how they capitalise on them, or how they try and avert that threat, if it's a threat. Okay. So new developments, and we've all seen, haven't we, the changes in the digital space, the way that, you know, it's not that long ago that people did not, you know, not do this. That's what we do, isn't that? Glued to this, to the point that actually it's almost not even mobile anymore because they need charging. I know you can get mobile chargers, but you know, this is what people seem to rely on, and this is all I see. This is all I see. I find it quite frightening, but that's just me. Anyway, so you know, that whole development for us as, you know, marketers in the fashion industry, mobile. I can remember when I worked in industry. Now this is 9 years ago that I left, so it's not that long ago, and that mobile didn't exist. It wasn't there. It didn't exist, really. It was in its infancy. Our websites looked like, oh, I don't know, they were dreadful. You know, the technology has moved so quickly in the last 10 years, so quickly. And it's become, when you're young, it's just a natural part of your life. Do you agree? Tech just is there, and yeah. I'm from a generation before technology. And I engage where I need to, and that's great, and I think some of it is amazing. But I can remember when it didn't exist. And I can remember, this is hilarious, and this must be maybe 20 years ago. Obviously, we didn't know what the World Wide Web was, honestly. And when we first got it at work, people were going, oh, this is amazing. And you could search, and you could put a plus sign, so that's in very recent history, okay? So, technology drives a lot of what we do, and companies have to work out, how do we harness the development, or do we, for our consumers, do we not need to do that? Do we need to put technology into supply chains? Do we need to improve product development processes? Do we need to improve all sorts of things? But it's about understanding what's happening out there in the market and what the organisation might need to be aware of and tap into. Okay. So it's interesting in terms of thinking about the macro environment, because you can make the world's longest list of pest or pestel factors. Students do it all the time. Okay. But you cannot, as an organisation, address all those things. So you have to decide which are important. So identifying, pestel is useful for identifying the things which are very pertinent and likely to affect future development. So things that might change over time that the organisation needs to keep up to speed with. The things that are static and remain fixed, there's not really a great deal that companies can do about those, apart from in terms of their change or their attitude towards them. So things, to an extent, where you've got settled economic factors, political factors, etc., most companies just go with those. Yeah, it's fine. But would you agree, which area is most dynamic? Tech? Who said that? Yeah. Tech and social. Yeah. The socio cultural side of this. So they're the ones where companies really have to kind of keep on board. So as a little beautiful light relief, I thought I'd just, this is the second one here is this paper. And I've been reading as well this week, so I just thought that might be interesting because it kind of encapsulates a number of things. And I suppose it's more for some of you who might be interested in this area of sustainability or fast fashion or luxury, but it kind of brings all three of them together. I just thought that was a nice paper. And then when you're kind of using the Pestel tool and trying to find information to complete it, which I'm not asking you to do in this assessment, but the nature of the Pestel tool is you need to populate the boxes. You need to work out what the factors are. And there's loads of information. Obviously, we know we can look on the web. We can find lots and lots of information. We have to make sure that information is credible when we're writing and when we're talking in this kind of environment. Academic, commercial, credible. Okay? They don't have to be all three things, but they have to be one of those things at least. Okay? And there's some lovely, done by Deloitte. Let's see if this opens. Oh, hang on. For anyone that's interested in luxury, let's see. Please open. If it doesn't, it's fine. What do you want to do? Yes, I want to open it. Okay. Lots and lots. So Deloitte, recognisable company, credible company. This is fine. I'm not going to go through all this, by the way. But just to show you some of the sources of information that might be interesting and actually might even inspire you in terms of your area of study. So they're talking here about luxury, the new luxury consumer, the forces shaping the market. This is what we're talking about in the kind of the macro environment. We're talking about forces that shape the market, and then actually in the competitive environment as well. We're going to even look at the 5 forces. But this is more broad. This is about a decade of change. Consumers in emerging markets driving luxury market growth. Interesting. So some of this information you could use really nicely to populate a Pestel, to think, what's this telling me? Okay, what does it mean? How does it mean? But actually, to populate a Pestel model can take rather a lot of analysis and investigation. So that might be one of its, actually completing it accurately is quite a task. Okay. So here they're talking about travel and tourism. They're talking about luxury market trends. So from physical product to the digital experience, from standardization to personalization, and then this is all kind of these kind of influencing factors that companies need to be aware of. I thought that there's some beautiful what they're called, pictures as well. The global economic outlook talks about the influence of that, obviously very important, and how actually within here you've got political and legal, you've got economic, all bundled together. So if you were talking about changes and opportunities and threats in the luxury market, a source like this is fantastic to use. Not just a single source, you would use others, but really good place to start so that you can start to understand what those factors are. Okay? Because otherwise it can feel quite so much information, especially if you actually within an organisation and you're trying to do this within a business, it feels like everything is going wrong. But this is really about trying to dig down and find some information. It's also got beautiful pictures on, which I always admire. So yeah, profit margins, talks about the global powers of luxury goods. It's just some lovely information here. And there are lots of these Deloitte assessments and summaries of different markets. So it might be something that's quite useful for you, for example. Okay, what time? Right, let's take 2 minutes. Everyone wake up. Just have a chat. I'll do it. Okay. You don't need to use pens, that's for next time. It's to choose a model. Critique the model and see how useful it might be in the fashion industry, whether it's useful at all. Some companies are so quick and speedy and driven by technology that some of these models are they're of no real value. No, you're talking about the strategic planning process, overview, pick a model, critique the model, how it works in fashion, or is it relevant to the fashion industry? Well, you've got to talk about the strategic planning process first. You've got to answer the question and then review the model. Use the model and review it, critique it, and you decide whether it's a good model. There's no right or wrong answer. It's about you deciding how relevant, say, Estelle is in the fashion industry. Or how relevant Forces 5 Forces is in the fashion industry. It's a very straightforward question. You make it more complex. Yeah. Well, we've been learning the first 2 weeks, really, talking about how companies look at their internal resources and external opportunities, and how they think about the strategic process, and how in week 1 and 2 we looked at about 8 different approaches to strategic planning. You've got to decide in terms of what your opinion is of that, what your view is of that, and find some other support to underpin what you're saying about it. So it's my opening start would be it's quite complex. Companies do it in a number of different ways. Blah blah blah. But it's your opinion but grounded in what you've read. But if you don't read and you don't start, it's going to feel worse. And you've got to read the question. Yeah. Or it might not be important. You're allowed to say, in the fashion industry, this model is not done. It doesn't work. But you'll only know that if you've done some reading and some thinking. Yeah? You'll be fine. You will be fine, honestly. And then everyone's like, oh, I'm not going to let you worry and go to the seminar on Thursday. Not all of it. You've got to include 10 citations, but it's the process of looking at some of the literature to support your ideas. Then you might say, how does it work in the fashion industry, or how does it work in fast fashion? You don't need to analyse a company, but that's the process. You can use examples, but you don't need to sector, for example, the burglary over there, value of that. Go to the seminar again, which I told students they should use examples if they want to, but I've not. I'd actually do that. But the SWOT model, for example, brings together the internal and the external. Question marks, I've got the back seat. Driving number off. Okay. Let's see, objectives and soft. Right, okay. One of the interesting things about analysis is it's quite overwhelming. So imagine being in the boardroom at Burberry, or someone, I know not all of you like Burberry, but somewhere else, and trying to assimilate and to gather and to understand and interpret all of the things that we've talked about for these last few weeks. And I know that because having worked in industry, you do just feel overwhelmed, and you do feel like there are a lot of things going on externally that actually as an organisation you feel threatened by, but you're not quite sure what you can do about it. Okay, so that's quite challenging as an organisation. So where I worked, it was quite an old-fashioned company, but they knew they had to modernise. They knew that the consumers were starting to develop this kind of wants and needs around technology, around shopping habits, etc. And interestingly, probably at that time, and I think I mentioned this to you, we talked about our customers really wanted to have some very big physical stores. So M Brown Group, who are a local company, but a very big company, $500 million turnover, they eventually, after I'd left, they developed a store portfolio for some of their brands, and they brought in expertise because they didn't have any. They'd done the analysis, they'd worked out they didn't have the capability, but they knew that their market really wanted this kind of multi-channel experience. So they've invested millions of pounds in store rent, store fits, etc., etc., etc. And then I saw an email from Drapers last week that says they're closing them all. Okay, that's in about a 6-year time span. Opened 20, 30 big stores. And now, because the market's changed, they can't make them work. Consumers are not going because they've improved the online experience so much. They've been trapped in this kind of they haven't done it particularly well, but they've done it in a way that they believe was right for their consumers. But now they are having to close those stores down, which obviously it's a loss of money. It's a loss from the bottom line and profit. So it's got implications. It also does not reflect particularly well on the retailer or the brand, because it shows that they're perhaps not quite there in terms of capabilities. But they are investing into more of the digital space, more other kind of experience online rather than physical stores. So some companies have to take advantage and capitalise on what's out there, but it can feel, and maybe, you know, when you start to think about all the factors that you might ever need to look at and populating all these models, it can feel a bit, oh, it's a bit much. But it's about identifying the key ones, and that's what the models are for. So thinking about the microenvironments, so the near environments of the industry bit of all this, trying to make this, you know, it can feel quite dry as well. But when you get into this and start to think, why, what does this mean? What does this mean? I find this very exciting. It's, you know, the strategic ideas that come from this analysis can be amazing. Okay, so thinking about what's going on with the customer group, what are your competitors doing? And having an understanding and a handle on that, and an insight into competition. You may not always, when you go about this in your working lives, when you've graduated, etc., you may not always be able to find out exactly what your competitors are doing in terms of turnover or other kind of internal things. But as a consumer, you can see what they're doing and you can perceive what they do. Okay. So understanding the competition is critical, and looking at the market and where the market's moving. So for, you know, useful sources such as Mintel, for example, will give you trends in the market and recent trends in the fashion market, globally as well as locally. But thinking about the market and how the market is changing, and we'll probably look a bit more at this in the second half of the lectures. But we are going to think about it now in terms of the forces that surround our market, because they have changed, and they're not how they were at all, even going back 10 years, and certainly going back 20 years. So understanding this is important. So markets, competitors, suppliers, intermediaries and channels, whether you're a public or private entity, whether you're, you know, public or you're selling for profit, it doesn't really matter. But understanding this section and understanding what you can do about it as an organisation is vital. So, in your competitive environments, the firms influence each other. Think about fashion. You can think about luxury, you can think about high street, you can think about fast fashion, but think about those sectors of the bigger market and how they impact on each other, how competitors impact. So what somebody does now, others will copy. Okay? Firms influence each other, and this whole nature of competition is, you know, is kind of, if you want to use the war analogy of strategic planning, this is the battleground, isn't it? This is where companies are fighting for consumer money, really, and engagement. So this near environment is actually more important than the macro environment, because it's that direct look at what's going on with your competitors and your customer group. So it's where companies are offering similar goods to similar consumers. Okay. It's your strategic group. So understanding the marketplace, what industry the business is in, how it's behaving and changing. Really important. And what's the strategic group and who are the competition? So you might be able to think about this in for your home country, but certainly in the UK, it is the retailers who are not really sure who they're competing with, again, who they will find themselves struggling. Okay. If we talk about Primark as their kind of leading cheap value retailer, and Zara as the leading fast fashion retailer with the best kind of style, relative quality, design, etc. You think about those and think about then how other companies might look upon those leaders, try and copy them, but perhaps actually don't have the internal capabilities to do what those organisations do. Okay. So thinking about competition and their strengths and weaknesses as well. So we can do this, we can understand this. And as I said before, if you can't, when you actually come to do this at any stage, if you can't find their specific detail, you can take a look at what they're doing and infer what their strategy is and infer who they are, who they're targeting from the way they behave. Okay? So you can look at Burberry, you can look at them versus Gucci or Chanel or whoever, and you can infer from what those organisations do, how they target, how they present themselves, the customers they are reaching out to, what they all are about, okay? And likewise, any other sector of the market that you choose, okay? But this is about being, I would say this is about being commercially aware as well. So, yeah, I know you're all here to study, brilliant, but presumably after you have finished your master's degree, most of you will probably have to go and work. Yeah. So this is the good time to start developing your commercial awareness. So, and again, it doesn't matter whether you're, kind of focused on the UK at the moment because you're here and you start to understand what's going on in the fashion environment here, or from your home country, if that's somewhere you're going to go back to. But develop it, it's a really key skill and it's a really key differentiator when you decide to go for a job. Honestly, believe me. And that is around reading the news, reading the trade press, which, like for the UK, the Drapers, look at Mintel. Look, if you're interested in marketing, look at our trade press here, which is Marketing Week, Campaign, Media Week, PR Week. There are lots and lots of trade journals that talk about all the campaigns that are happening. So if you're interested in online or store or any of those kind of elements, being able to access that information and get to understand what's going on helps you in all this. Okay. Does that make sense? Does it make sense? Yeah. I can put, if you are interested, what did I say I put on Blackboard? I said I put Christopher Moore on. I'll do that. But on Blackboard, again, for your commercial awareness benefits, and also looking at what we call trade press helps you. They're all online. They're not physical things. They're online. Might help you to look at an area of research that you're interested in that you might develop for your dissertation. Okay, so I'm going to put the links up to Marketing Week, etc. You have to sign up, but they're free. Okay, so you have to sign up. I can't sign you up. Follow the instructions. But what that means then is you get the information that you might be interested in terms of marketing campaigns and what's happening in the industry. So it's useful. Okay, so we're going to have a think about the nature of the industry, and you can think about, if you choose this model, I'm sure I've put this model on, how this might apply in fashion, because we're going to have a quick look at Porter's 5 forces. And, you know, this just literally breaks down some of the issues that affect an industry. And I like this. I think it's, you know, I think it's a fairly straightforward way of viewing the industry that you're in. And I've seen some really good examples of how students take this piece of theory, this framework, and apply it really well, okay? So, let's go back. I don't know why I do these flying in things. So, looks at really the nature of competition and how do we think the fashion industry is competitive? Yes. Give me a big yes. Yes, it is, isn't it? Doesn't matter which sector you're at, because a lot of it, you exclude the very top end, but a lot of the products are interchangeable. Fashion companies take their inspiration from the trends and the catwalks. They develop their ranges with their consumer in mind. But as you get to the middle of the market and lower, this t-shirt, I can buy it for £8. I can buy it for £14. I can buy it for £22. It's a very similar look, okay? You start to get that real substitution effect, because I know, for example, I might look at something quite expensive. I never buy it. But I might look at something expensive, I might look at Jigsaw, but actually I might see something there that I could probably buy in H&M. Not the same quality, of course, but it might be something very similar in terms of design, a lovely coat, simple, you know. So trading down, going, well, actually the coat in Jigsaw is £300, I won't find that. Something very similar in H&M is £65. Might be more worthwhile. So that whole thing about how we as consumers judge and go, yeah, I'm going to get that from there. I'm going to buy a luxury handbag. I talked about handbags last week. I'm going to buy a luxury handbag, but then I need to buy some very cheap t-shirts because I've run out of money, you know. So we're in a very competitive industry, aren't we? Where the fight for a consumer money is very, I would say it's intense and intensifying as the environment changes and the factors affect consumers, then impact on retailers. And you only have to look at store closures, and you only have to look at, you know, the changing nature, I suppose, of fashion companies. So, thinking about the profitability, thinking about if you're an outsider, would you enter the fashion industry? Would you set up a business and enter, we try and get in? And we might all go, ooh, I'm not sure. It seems quite hard. But when we think about the fast fashion, the digital companies, certainly in Manchester, as I was explaining last week, they have entered the market and very, very quickly established a foothold based on their technology, their price, their ability to deliver a fast fashion, cheap option for young consumers. I'll tell you about this one next week when we look at the brand, but this is, I think it's Pretty Little Thing. There's a lovely piece in Draper's about Pretty Little Thing. Now, they're an online digital retailer, okay? They are linked to Boohoo, and the article talks about how this sub-brand, this sister brand, if you like, have used the assets of Boohoo. They've used their infrastructure and their capabilities to launch and develop this new brand targeted at very young people with not much money, but they're doing amazingly well. But they've used the assets and the resources of the parent brand. It's just an interesting way of looking at things, but we might have a little look at that next week. So, thinking about the environment and thinking, would I enter? Would I develop a business in the fashion industry tomorrow? Not sure. But we're thinking about how easy is it for competitors to enter the industry? We'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. The bargaining power of customers. Where else can I take my money? The bargaining power of suppliers. How can I control the people I'm supplying if I'm a supplier? The ease with which substitute products can be introduced, so, you know, changes then that just kind of take consumers away from brands, and the extent of competition. Where's the gap? That's what we're looking for. If you were going to build a business and enter the fashion market tomorrow, surely you're looking for a gap in the market. Fair? Are there any gaps? There must be, mustn't there? There must be gaps in the market, okay? Probably some of you will have seen this before. It's just a really nice way of thinking about how competitive a market is. Rivalry, risk of entry, bargaining power, threat of substitutes, and more bargaining power, two ends of the spectrum. Okay? So think about risk of entry by potential competitors. What do you think? Luxury sector of the market, what is the risk of entry by more kind of, you know, by potential competitors? What do you think? The nature of the luxury end of the market, likely to attract lots of new businesses? No? More difficult to enter? Yeah? Profits can be depressed, so, you know, you might not make an awful lot of money, but on the other hand, you may do. But can you enter that business? Do you have the capability to enter that sector of the market? Sorry. But barriers are financial. You need money. Things like patents. Things like uniqueness of product, design, economies of scale. Thinking about how you can manufacture, how you can produce and get product to consumers and make money. And thinking about brand loyalty and how do you, if you were to enter the luxury sector, how do you draw consumers away from those more stable, more heritage brands that have been there for a long, long time, for example. There may be restricted distribution channels, but actually that's maybe not as relevant anymore. I mean, that was, Doyle said this in 2002, maybe not as relevant because the distribution channels have opened up because of technology. So, bargaining power of buyers, but the way in which we, as consumers, can actually control, if we really want to, control organisations. Dictate the price and profits by not buying. If we abstain as consumers, companies go out of business, don't they? You know, we have a lot of choice. I think that's the big thing in fashion, isn't it? As consumers, we have a lot of choice. There are other places we can go. So the bargaining power of buyers, and then the bargaining power of suppliers. Suppliers can, I mean, quite often we hear about suppliers being under pressure from the retailers. It's particular. I mean, it does happen in fashion, but it's particularly relevant in some of the big supermarket chains where they, you know, they're almost monopolistic. Some of the supermarkets in this country. And they put intense pressure on suppliers. However, if you flip that round, where you've got unique suppliers who are delivering something which is really kind of special, then you know, they're a limited pool and they have more power. Okay, so again, if you think about luxury, that's probably a case in point there, isn't it? Where it's a limited pool, the product, the fibre, the quality, the design. You've got to have that to the right level, so it's a limited supply. Yeah, and they can affect profits definitely. Either way, the threat of substitute. An industry's attractiveness is less, so you would be less likely to go into the industry if there were other. It's easily substituted by alternative technology or the products of other industries. So the example here is about trainers and what can you substitute for trainers, for example, boots and other types of shoes, okay? But we're talking about fashion, aren't we? So I think it's more, there isn't really a substitute for the holistic look at fashion, is there? We can't wear alternative clothes. Really? Can we? Can't wear, I don't know, we could wear boiler suits or we could wear overalls or something, I don't know. But we're all going to buy clothes. And I think then it's about the competitive nature more than anything rather than the threat of substitutes. And this leads us to the rivalry where, yeah, it can affect, the big thing, it can affect profitability in the industry. So if companies are forced to compete on price, it squeezes their margins and it affects their profit. That's a huge thing, isn't it? So I've talked a fair bit about M&S, only because it's it's not one of my favourite companies, but it is a company that is very, very interesting, and I know that some of you have been now. But Marks & Spencer, we're always known, a British brand known for quality, and remember we talked about value and how companies deliver value. That was about their kind of, they used to have a lot of UK factories. What's that? Must be something electrical then. They used to have a lot of factories in the UK. Their quality was really high. They were more expensive, but people accepted that quality price ratio was a good thing and it delivered value and their products lasted for a long time. And Marks & Spencer, a huge organisation, have decided that they actually need to bring their prices down. So on top of all their other issues, they're now reducing their selling price, which infers that they are reducing their quality, which will not please an awful lot of their customers. But really it's because they're trying to compete in this industry where price seems to be, for a lot of consumers, a critical deciding point. And M&S want to be in that, you know, if consumers have a pot or a pile or a group of shops where they go, M&S are trying to make sure that they are in that grouping and that they're not falling to the side. Because I think a lot of the time consumers are going, well, I won't go to M&S because they're not fashionable, they're no longer good quality, and they're just a little bit confused. So it can drive price down and it can drive profit down. So where we've got large number of competitors, absolutely. A stable or declining market, debatable on fashion. Where fixed costs are high, very much used to be the case in the fashion industry. Your fixed costs used to be high. A lot of them were in a physical store. But where the new digital age has arrived, and we have digital companies who only operate in that space, their fixed costs come down, okay? They have a cost benefit, if you like, and a cost advantage over some of the companies who are holding large store portfolios. And you can see, can't you? You can see how, if you look around the industry and look slightly beyond pure fashion and look at some of the companies like we talked about Amazon, they're just developing more and more capability in terms of being able to take money from vast numbers of consumers and then use that money to reinvest in other strategies. But they're, you know, overall, I'm sure their costs are enormous, but they're not at the moment. They've got some, they're trialling these, what they call high-tech stores. But, you know, there are big changes in the industry. And actually, where companies, rents are really high in this country, in the UK, for stores. Rents are really, really high. So if you have a store, or you have 200 or 500 stores, and you have to keep those stores going, and you're also trying to invest in your online capability to make everybody happy. That's a really difficult balancing act. And actually, you know, in a competitive industry, that's where the money does start to drain away. This other point, intensity around products perceived as similar. They are, aren't they? If you look at the mass kind of consumption of fashion, if you look in the kind of the mid to the low end of the market, products are very similar across retailer, across brand. And then the more you start to move towards something a bit more distinctive, bespoke, etc., the less competition there is. So it might be safer, actually, to have something that's quite unique. I was talking to some students yesterday about a Japanese brand. My students teach me lots of things, and they were saying it's really expensive. Really expensive. I pronounce it Vizvam, but they pronounce it Wizwam. Do either of those words mean anything to you? Do either of those pronunciations? Anyway, it's a Japanese brand, and I looked, and because they were saying, oh, it's really expensive, we love this brand, it's very artisanal, it's all designed by this guy, and it's very, and they were really talking about it very kind of emotively. And I looked, and I think the cheapest thing on the website was £700 for a shirt. So I thought, blimey. But, you know, the more bespoke, the more distinctive your brand, your delivery, your offer, the more consumers seem to be prepared to pay for it. But it will only be a certain group of consumers. It won't be everybody. Okay. So, you know, it might be a good choice, the 5 forces model, to apply it to the fashion industry and talk about how it fits and how it doesn't fit. So, Marks and Spencer, years and years ago, if I refer back to them when they were in their heyday in the 70s and early 80s, they were doing really well. They were in control. And actually, the rivalry in the fashion market at that time was not so intense as it is now. Now, they're in a much more difficult situation because the market's changed around them, the fashion market's changed around them. So it's just to illustrate how you can use this in terms of, it paints a really nice picture, I think. Paints a really nice picture. Hope it makes sense. And then, really, thinking, we've looked at a lot of models. We're going to wrap up the last two at this very end now. But actually, some of what we learn and some of what we see and we kind of employ our investigation and look at organisations and look at the industry, what we see is agility, technology, faster speed, just capitalising on what's out there. Does that mean actually that some of the models, like I was saying, some of the models that we're using or that are still used, for some organisations who are very, very fast, lean, agile, they may not be as important for those kind of organisations because technology, if we think about this, technology has been a huge driver of change. But still, that side, competitors can really capitalise on their kind of their internal strengths and capitalise on what's going on in the market by exploiting the weaknesses of others, targeting their consumer group, avoiding surprises. Yeah, hopefully nobody can avoid surprises really, but trying to have that vision of what is going on, having a strong strategic plan that hopefully kind of protects against surprise. You can't always protect against surprise. Yeah, you're allowed to imitate what your competitors do as an organisation, especially if you see something that's revolutionary, that's working, that engages consumers. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, isn't it? That's what we say in the UK. But interestingly, being aware of where things are going wrong setting off down the wrong path, as I was talking about before. The company I work for, they really thought that stores were the way to go. Retrench, stop spending there, take the money that you can from that and reinvest it. Undo what you've done in terms of if it's not the right strategy and your competitors are doing other things, and finding new niches and finding gaps. That's what analysis really, some of the analysis process is about. It's about saying, where do we go? Where do we go next? Where's the gap? Where's that group of consumers that we might be able to reach and target with something that we can make or supply or develop and sell to them at a profit? It sounds simple, doesn't it? That's obviously a simplistic way of looking at it. But finding gaps is interesting and important. Yeah, I mean, competitor analysis and examining the nature of the industry that you're in is really important, because actually it allows companies to make these decisions, to understand what they're about, to confirm what they know about themselves, and it can really be a warning of change. So, I don't think I've talked about it. Have I mentioned John Lewis now? Does everyone know? Has everyone been to a John Lewis store? Yay, good. Okay, good. Right, okay. John Lewis in the UK are called the bellwether of retail. Okay. What does that mean? It means that when something goes wrong at John Lewis, there's probably something going to go wrong for the whole industry. Okay. Because they're seen as the bellwether. When things are good at John Lewis, things are good. And when things are bad at John Lewis, when things are not working. Now, the last set of financial reports that they issued, they'd lost almost, I think I'm right in saying they'd lost almost all their profit. Because they'd been expanding, they've changed strategy, they've been investing, and they didn't have a lot of money left at the end of their last financial year. So, but look, you know, if an organisation is kind of here and looking at what John Lewis do, that's a warning, isn't it? If they suddenly announce they've got no profit this year, you look at their strategy and go, something not right there. So having this competitive understanding is really important. Yeah, taking bits, this is, don't mind, we can take elements of competitor strategies and use them. So you have to know them inside out. So that's why, looking at the nature of the industry. So we've got some criticisms of the five forces model. I bet you'll all probably end up choosing this model because it's got lots of meat to it, lots of things. It's dynamic. Does it capture change? Does it capture what's really going on in the industry? Okay, so we have to think about this. It's speculative rather than hard evidence. You can take that five forces and put your interpretation of what you think is happening in it, but you know, it's not necessarily concrete, is it? And yeah, industry structures, they change and they're blurred, and it's not always, you know, you can't always definitely say that one industry does not affect another industry. And it really is this snapshot in time. It's a picture. And actually I'd say that, you know, most of the models that we've thought about, most of the frameworks that we've thought about, that's what they do. They capture a picture in time. Would that be fair? Because you can only capture what you know today. Yeah? And we can only hope to look at the future and look at trends that are coming. Yeah, firms that appear to be favoured, they can fail. They can fail. You know, a lot of the, when you think about who builds these models, who develops these models within the organisation, we all come to that with our own perspective and view of the world. So we may complete models and use that information in a way that's perhaps too positive or optimistic, and don't see perhaps some of the downsides. So, last 20 minutes. We're just going to wrap up, and we're going to talk about pulling this together and what the SWOT tool's for, and a very brief look then at ANSOF because Ansoff takes us into the strategic development area, which happens after week 6, okay? And hopefully this will wrap up. So the SWOT, where's my SWOT picture? I've not got my SWOT picture. I'll have to draw a SWOT picture. Do we all know what the SWOT looks like? This is quite critical because there's no, you can't draw you a picture. Anyway, it's a 4-box matrix which lists strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, okay? I really believed I had put a matrix on here. However, so it's a 4-box model. Jackson Shaw think it's essential for fashion companies. It's definitely a good tool for capturing information. But it's got to be brief. You cannot write a whole essay in a SWOT analysis. It's got to be brief. The things that you list in terms of the strengths and weaknesses of the organisation and the opportunities and threats from the external environment have to be done in order of importance. Whose order of importance? Whoever's creating that SWOT. So that's, again, it's like, whose perception does that come from? Who in the organisation might lead the development of a SWOT analysis? And what do they see and what do they bring of themselves when they write the SWOT? And I never used to think about that when I worked in industry. You just come with a very concrete mind and go, this is how it is, this is what we're going to do, this is where the issues are. But actually, having been now in academia for 9 years, you understand as a person what you might bring to that job and what your influences might be. So, it's got to be very brief, it's got to be done through bullet points, and it looks at how the organisation can hopefully rise to opportunities and defend against threats from what's going on in the macro and the micro environment. It might talk about manufacturing and product strengths, financial strengths, organisational and marketing strengths. But companies have to be honest and they have to identify their weaknesses as well. And you know what? That's really difficult for organisations to admit to a lot of the time. Nobody wants to be sitting with the CEO or the marketing director and acknowledging that the organisation have weaknesses, because that's just culturally quite often not a good thing to do. So SWOT analyses can paint quite like I say, an optimistic view of the organisation, because you come to that with a not wanting to be seen to be failing. So it takes into account, obviously, the strengths and weaknesses of the organisation, and it takes the pastel and pulls that information to summarise what the opportunities might be. Is it something technological? Is it something consumers are doing? Is it the market? Is it something specific in the fashion environment? And what the threats might be. Could be something very, very similar. Opportunities and threats can look very, very similar, because if the organisation can't manage to do something about both, then you know it's a problem and it's a challenge. So you've got to get the weaknesses in there as well. I will stick the box in the slides. Because I can't actually believe that I haven't put the box in there. And actually, developing the SWOT can lead to objective setting. It can help organisations decide the big ideas, the big objectives in terms of what they might need to achieve in this year, next year, 5 years. And we're not going through that process, we're not doing a whole plan, but it's just to show you how using the tools to get where we are, the SWOT, the pastel and all the other tools that we've looked at can help managers make decisions, and they can help managers to set some theoretically clear, smart objectives, which could be financial and non-financial, usually are. It might be about sales, it might be about profit, it might be about return on investment. It might help having all the analysis and all the ways that we've looked at in terms of how you bring together information. You would hope that combining that with the internal sales data and performance and historical data, etc., that we looked at, you build a picture. And I said again, it's like, I like to think of these as brand or company stories or company pictures. It helps you build a picture of your organisation. And you might then also, hopefully, be able to set targets around marketing, stores, how much you're going to sell, new products, etc., etc. And you might also be able to talk about your marketing communications approach and how you might develop campaigns and who you need to talk to and how much money you might need to spend across traditional offline media, online media, combination of them all. We will talk about this going forward into 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. All the things that you can do, all the things that you can build upon. And actually, again, moving towards that is thinking about how might the Ansoff model, which 1957, so it's a very mature, let's call it mature, it's a mature model, the Ansoff model, has been critiqued, has been supported, has, you know, it's a useful strategy analysis approach. Simple. I have done, this one is definitely on here, we'll see this in a minute. 4-box model, some of you may already hopefully be aware of it, which in theory helps organisations look at where they might develop. Okay, and of course what we do know is fashion businesses and other businesses are not, you don't necessarily just choose one quadrant, quite often involved in different areas. So they might be looking at market penetration, trying to do sales promotions, trying to get those customers, those current customers to buy more. They might be doing marketing communications campaigns, and at the same time they might be extending into China from the UK. They might be enhancing their digital platforms, trying to reach new audiences. They might be looking at new product development. Okay, so it's an interesting way of looking at the process of where you can go in terms of improving and developing the organisation. So, yes, so it's a 4-box model. It's very straightforward. Top quadrant, current market, current product, do what you do. Keep advertising, keep those customers. Focus. You're trying here, one of the things you're trying to do here is to stop those customers going somewhere else and escaping. Don't let your customers escape. Remember, it costs businesses far more to try and attract new customers than it does to hold on to their current consumers. Okay, sorry, I've walked away from the mic there. Current market with new product is, you know, trying to reach new consumers, trying to expand your current market in terms of getting them to buy more. So developing, so for example, perfume, luxury brands perfume, trying to get consumers who are your current market but to buy more. Looking at new markets, you might expand. Use the example of Kate Moss there, that helped Topshop move into the US market, but also did a great deal in terms of market penetration in the UK, for example, with current consumers, really, really engaged. And diversifying, looking for new product areas. High risk, higher risk. Yeah, so penetration, increasing sales through selling the same product to the same market. Keep it simple. Product development, growing sales by introducing new products to the same market. So yeah, that could be perfumes, it could be eyewear, glasses, homeware, etc. Developing markets, new territories, new consumer groups. And I kind of have said, you know, I've mentioned this a few times, so I think there are lots of retailers and fashion brands who believe they need to chase new groups of consumers. I think international expansion is one thing. If you do it well, you do it correctly. I think if you understand your brand and you can make some good cultural links, that you understand the territory that you're going into, that you understand where they are in terms of their consumption states. But, you know, there are lots of, if you really trying to find, say, for example, trying to extend into, everyone's chasing young consumers. Almost every retailer wants young consumers. Now, some young consumers around the globe are more wealthy than others. And others, they're probably not, they might be the target market of the future, but they might not be the target market for now. So I think trying to develop that for some retailers is a real challenge, and trying and find new sources of money, really. It's a real challenge for them. And diversifying, this is the highest risk, because really taking new products into new categories new products and new categories for new markets is quite challenging, can be quite difficult. So Ansoff can be a useful tool because it might highlight some of the options for an organisation, but you cannot just sit and stare at an Ansoff matrix in isolation. Because actually, without going through the process of analysis, this journey that we hopefully have been on, you need the other information to help you generate those ideas of strategies and where you might go. You've got to understand what your consumer group are doing. You've got to understand the potential of other markets. You've got to understand the kind of the risk of diversification. And actually, it's great to use the Ansoff framework, but it needs to be done in conjunction with some of the other analysis that an organisation would do. And also understanding whether it's a sensible strategic move if the external environment is saying other things, saying it's not. Okay. So you might, if you choose Ansoff for your model or your framework for this essay, you might be able to think of some other limitations or its applicability, etc., etc. Okay. So, but we've done very well there. So I am hoping that you don't feel bamboozled by models, because you only have to pick one in this piece of coursework. You only have to pick one. Do not describe or analyse all 6 models that I've listed. You only have to pick one. Okay, but today we've looked at a number of models again. Pest and Pestel, 5 forces, SWOT and Ansoff. Okay, it concludes the journey of analysis, and we'll look next week at why do this. It's for building brands. It's in order to build strong brands, to build brand equity, and I want to really hopefully engage you with the branding experience and thinking about why companies build brands and the value of brands and consumers' engagement with them. Okay, there's some references and reading which might help. And any questions? Otherwise, I will see you next Thursday. Okay. Thank you very much. And I will do this when I get back. Hello.
In the seminar, the teacher said that we need to describe several marketing models and in several words, and then say the reason why I choose that a specific one. So do we need to
I don't want you to spend your time describing the models. I want you to answer the question.
So just strictly answer that.
Yeah. So just pick one and justify why you picked that one.
No need for the description about other.
No, do not do that. I'll send an email out. Do not. I will send you all in. Do not describe. Yeah, I'm going to send an email out saying in no way do you need to describe all those 6 models. You pick one.
No.
I will. I'm going to send an email. Don't describe the models. I just worry that everyone's going to do that, and I don't know why. But just answer the question. But yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi. You're back again. Are you okay?
Ask about whether do we need to analyze fast fashion use for or
Can do. Yeah. Yeah.
analyze strength weakness?
Yeah. Yeah. You don't need to. You can then say, is that SWOT model useful in the fashion industry in fast fashion? After you've analysed it, but you don't need to. But
That's not essential.
it's not essential.
To analyze
No.
it.
But you might say something like a SWOT analysis may not. Fast fashion companies operate so quickly, just in time, lean, agile. They just do things. They respond. They react. They look at what consumers are doing and they immediately restock and resell. And they're not probably looking at some of these models from history, I suppose. They kind of push those out the window. But if you read a little bit about fast fashion, in fact, I'll put the Drapers thing up as well about fast fashion. That might help. But also the article that I put up as well might be useful. It's a different industry. The speed of change, the speed of development is very speedy, and actually, those companies probably do not sit around analysing their own company and thinking about, shall we do a pastel? They just don't. They just go do it. Yeah, so it's different nature of that. Yeah, is that okay?
Is SWOT the only model that covers both internal and external?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a model that pulls together the analysis that you do of the organisation and the analysis that you do from the external environment, and it gives you a picture. Yeah, is that okay?
So
Hello.
it's focused on the board, like the board fashion industry, not a specific brand.
Yeah, talk about abroad. So you can talk about all of it. You can talk about fast fashion or luxury or yeah, but you don't need to pick a specific brand.
Okay, so I'm confused.
You have
because
to answer the question.
Teacher in the seminar said,
Yeah.
give an example.
No, you can give examples, but I haven't. If you have to, like me, I'm going to also say
So this
read the
is
question.
not a case study.
No,
things.
that's later.
Okay,
That's later.
Okay.
Yeah. Honestly, I will send an email out later that I'm going to say, I'm just going to repeat the question again, and I'm going to say, don't describe any of the other models, just pick one model and analyse it. You've only got 1,000 words. And I'm going to say, you can use examples, but it's not an analysis of a company. You might use an example if it helps you to explain what you want to say. But I've not asked for anybody to use examples in the question.
No examples.
No, I've not asked for it. So it's up to you. You can do. But I have to let you use your judgment on that. It doesn't matter if you don't. I'm asking you to say, is that model of use in the fashion industry? I haven't said choose a model and apply it to a brand. That's next assessment. Yeah? Not this one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm going to send it out again because I'm going to make you all read the question again. Yeah? Don't worry. Do not worry. Everyone's really like,
Do we need to describe what is the strategic marketing process?
You've got to examine it, not describe it. You've got to examine it and talk about, we talked very briefly about multiple perspectives and how companies approach the strategic process. I'm not asking for too much.
Okay, thank
But I think if you read some of the slides, but then go to some of the sources that I've quoted, do some reading, you'll all feel a whole lot better about this. Yeah?
As you
Hello.
mentioned, the limitation of Ansoff.
Yeah.
So do I need to connect the SWOT or other models to the second part?
No, it's talking about the limitations. If you look at the Ansoff model, you need to do a bit more reading about Ansoff.
Just
Okay?
Ansoff.
Yeah, you only pick that one. You don't. You can talk about how it works in connection to other models, but you don't need to
Okay. Yeah.
talk about them as well. Yeah, is that okay? Good.
Do we need to talk about the history or other thing about the models? Or
You can, very briefly, you could say it was developed in, you know, if it's hands off, 1957. Is it still relevant? Yeah? You'll be fine. You're going to be fine. Hello.
Just a short question. Do you have any reference for that limitation
Well, yeah. Tell me, write your name down. No, in fact, shall I? There will be. It's from a paper. It's from a paper. Put your name down, and I will email you. It is from a paper.
So
Hello.
for this outline, I know this is wrong because
Okay.
I don't need to like pick a specific brand, right?
No,
So this is, I need to delete all this.
I'm going to send you all an email.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I need to change it to like fast fashion or luxury.
You can pick a sector, or you could say if you think about the whole of the fashion market. Depends what your perspective is. Where do you come from? China. Okay. Might be different in China than it is here, but if you try to look at, in fact, it's quite a good point. Actually, if you thought about five forces and you looked at the fashion industry, you can't use it because the fashion industry in the UK is so complex and is made up of so many different sectors. You would have to do something like five forces for one particular sector of the market.
Okay, so
But you can say the fashion industry, or you could say, I'm going to, you know, does this model, does the pastel model work in the fashion industry per se, or does it work in fast fashion? Does it work in luxury? And just have a think. You're going to think more broadly about how it might work and whether it's useful. You can do it.
okay, so I still need to mention the external analysis and internal analysis.
You do if you're talking about the SWOT model.
Only the SWOT model.
Yeah. If you're talking about pastel, then obviously you're focusing on the external, but you're only focusing on the big external issues. If you're looking at the micro environment, you've got to think about another model. But the SWOT brings everything together, but it's challenging to build, isn't it? It's challenging to build. If you've gone through all that analysis process and you have to condense that down to a 4-box model with limited, it's quite challenging to do. But you can talk about it, relax, enjoy it. Go to the seminar. Thank you. Oh, thank you. I will. So what? Right. It was the reference for the limitations. I know. I absolutely know what it is. It's fine. I'll email you. Thank you. Hello. It's all right. It's a pleasure.
I'm not sure. Should we just answer the evaluation of the strategic marketing